Welcome back to Responding to Human Trafficking for Pregnancy Resource Centers. This is Module 7, and today we're going to talk about trauma's impact on cognition and behavior. After completing this module, you'll be able to recognize signs of post-traumatic stress disorder and complex trauma, help clients sort through options and seek the best resources, use grounding techniques with clients during stressful interactions, understand brain states exploited by abusers, and describe strategies that help produce clearer thinking patterns. Post-traumatic stress disorder is often attributed to veterans who have survived combat situations, but in recent years the same symptoms have been seen among others who have suffered different kinds of trauma. The core violation of child sexual abuse has become so common in the United States that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys are expected to experience this kind of trauma before the age of 18. Of those children, many will not have the resources to cope positively. A child's age and developmental stage is crucial to his or her ability to process the language necessary to report and to understand it all. Let's look at adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. The timing and severity of the trauma can impact the development of executive reasoning skills, stunting one's ability to evaluate the consequences of their actions. People with PTSD may be unpredictable and appear out of control at times. An important body of research called Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs, can help us understand the lifelong impact of child sexual assault and other forms of trauma. Researchers have found 10 categories of ACEs. The specific type of adverse childhood experience is seldom an isolated event, but instead is a set of living conditions that cause significant long-term stress in childhood and lead to chronic physical, mental, social, and financial problems in adulthood. The telltale signs of PTSD are a pervasive pattern of dysregulation. With the inability to manage emotions, even the slightest irritations can cause rage or tearful breakdowns. Problems with attention and concentration. Internal and external stimuli are constant. Difficulty getting along with others. This is a natural consequence of the disruption of the brain's fear versus trust response to trauma. She may enter your center dealing with a temporary crisis, or she may be living a life of constant crisis because of past or current trauma. Labor or sex trafficking may be that trauma. The pervasive pattern of dysregulation may be manageable or completely debilitating. She may be able to keep a job and live with others, or she may often get fired, quit, and live a transient lifestyle because she's unable to contain her emotional responses and frustration. Problems with attention and concentration can keep her from advancing in school or work and in relationships. Daily activities like managing money, paying bills, or planning for the future, even putting out the trash on time, or deciding what to wear can be extremely challenging. People with PTSD may have great difficulty getting along with other people because they have so much difficulty getting along with themselves. This doesn't have to be a life sentence. Many people with PTSD are able to successfully manage their symptoms. There are numerous therapeutic approaches to PTSD. Your clients may or may not have the ability to access them because of insurance or other factors, but your center may have community resources available. A ready relationship with social services in your area could be life-saving, as you well know. You are positioned to help her in so many ways. That's why you are my heroes. Therapy may be out of reach for a trafficking victim, but knowing the option is out there could give her hope for the future and help her see that there's more to life than her present circumstances. Complex trauma occurs when the abuse is ongoing and continues for some time, whereas PTSD can occur from a single exposure or short stint of exposure like in combat, or a simple, meaning single, sexual assault. For those whose abuse began in childhood or during a trafficking situation, particularly sex trafficking, their PTSD is complex. They'll need help to unlock learned responses. Complex or CPTSD is treated the same way as PTSD, but resiliency factors are generally less prominent. She will need long-term supportive relationships as well as therapy. We're on the cusp of so many advances in therapy for mental illnesses. The research is expanding daily. The key to helping people with PTSD and complex trauma is to ask if the provider is trauma-informed. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, psychotherapy, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, and other therapies may help some people but not others. She may need to keep trying and seek numerous approaches. A diagnosis can be helpful to get insurance to pay for therapy, for referrals, and for public assistance like Medicaid or sliding scale fees to help her along the way to building a better life. It is super important not to get locked into a label. Life is messy, and as soon as we embrace the messiness, the better we are able to cope. PTSD is an actual mental illness with visible consequences that can be seen on brain scans, and the symptoms are real, but they can be managed for a full and fruitful life. About finding resources. The best resources for one person may not be the best for another. Your center has a mission to provide life-saving options for women, which may include medical services like STD testing and limited ultrasound. A list of mental health resources fits in that mission too. A simple list of resources could be on a handout or a card. You might already have such a list, but if not, please contact your local social services, child advocacy center, or legal aid providers. A client in a trafficking situation may not be able to use the services until they get out, but they could make some contacts. Recall that the majority of trafficking survivors say that they were able to access medical services while they were being trafficked. You have a good idea of how hard it can be to work with women in stressful situations. She may be completely overwhelmed at the news she's pregnant or has an STD. Those who have experienced significant trauma have a much more difficult time under any kind of stress. She could fly into a rage or completely dissociate into a nearly catatonic state. A simple grounding technique could help. A touch on her hand with permission, a cool cup of water, or pointing out something for her to notice are all grounding techniques. We'll cover more on grounding techniques in a few minutes. Grounding is the ability to be present in the moment and process the physical sensations that are currently happening. So when we feel something in our environment, it helps to connect our body and brain to what's currently happening. That cool cup of water may help your client connect to the present if you point it out. The action has to be noticed, so saying, "Here's a cool cup of water," as you hand it to her will prompt recognition. She could be far away in thought, but a simple statement with a corresponding feeling could bring her back. For example, you could point out an object and ask her to identify the color. Grounding can be a self-soothing mechanism. For example, some people hug themselves unconsciously. Grounding can also be a learned behavior. Pointing out ways to intentionally use sight, smell, sound, touch, and taste can help people begin to cope with the lasting effects of past trauma. Our body and mind are totally connected. Because the body and the mind remember trauma, one or the other or both can be in ill health. Emotional stress can cause a cascade of neurochemical reactions and shifts in hormones. Pregnancy hormones do the same. So practicing intentional grounding can help our brains to have some more control over our bodies rather than the other way around. Grounding techniques vary. For example, you can feel your feet on the floor and press with alternating pressure from left to right. By making your internal dialogue intentional and soothing, you can stay in control and mitigate a stress response. It takes practice for best results. Other techniques like pinching one's fingers together or tapping are inconspicuous. Assuring ourselves that we are in the present by saying the day and time and possibly our location while stating the situation and its temporary or relative significance can also help reduce stress. Noticing things in the room, counting or mentioning the color, texture, or structure of objects can bring focus back to a wandering mind. Remind your clients to breathe. Box or structured breathing can be enormously helpful when they're facing a crisis. The limbic system of the brain is composed of a number of structures that become damaged by trauma. The amygdala, our emotional center, is encompassed by the hippocampus, which translates memories about past experiences. Trauma can cause an emotional loop in this area of the brain. Emotional looping can affect the prefrontal cortex, where executive reasoning, situation evaluation, and future planning happens. When trauma has been long-term or very intense, the brain sends chemicals that interfere with the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala to misinterpret threats as more significant than they actually are. The fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses to stress are related to the changes in brain function. The emotional amygdala is turned on and the interpretive hippocampus is suppressed, so the messages don't get processed well. She needs your gentle understanding. This state may take many years to repair, depending on her ACEs and her resilience factors. One factor shown to be vital in long-term healing is a trustworthy, caring adult, someone who will carefully help her understand and evaluate information. Brain state theory is very complex. Here, we're referring to the state of stress a client may be in. PTSD and complex trauma from long-term abuse result in a state of hyper or hypoarousal. She may be jumpy and easily irritated or maintain a flat affect. Drugs also alter our brain states. She may be off-kilter and unable to think through consequences or contemplate the future repercussions of her actions. She'll likely be in survival mode, seeking to meet basic needs immediately. Traffickers will keep her in a state of anxiety and stress. If this is a childhood condition, it may be relatively easy because of the physical changes in her brain, which increase vulnerability. Power over victims is the trafficker's whole focus, whether by overt violence or manipulation. Control of the person's brain will keep them in business. It may be physical or emotional trauma. It could be recent, as in seasoning or breaking, or extend from childhood. Victims may remain compliant, especially if they're in a constant state of stress. The stress hormones and neurochemicals involved affect the way the brain processes information to the point of shutting down the executive reasoning in the prefrontal cortex, leaving the emotional core in charge. If she is currently in a trafficking situation, the stress is not going away. Maintaining a relationship with her may eventually inspire her to exit, but there are ways that you can help her right now. The grounding techniques we've shared and the peaceful atmosphere of your center is a great start. You might encourage her to keep a journal. Of course, she needn't write anything incriminating, as she might get caught by her trafficker. But to share her thoughts and feelings and the things she's thankful for could be a way for her to develop better thinking. Reading every day is also a major help. Reading a small amount each day might be foreign to her. There are websites now that note the estimated time it takes to read each article. If she never reads, suggest 5 minutes a day. The length of time isn't the most important part, however. The activity of reading and the commitment that results can be immensely powerful. Obviously, we hope for good content, but the action is the key. Victims of trauma need to rewrite their brains, so the more positive the messages, the better. Encouraging her to reward herself for reading might help too. Be sure to praise her for any progress. People who suffer from PTSD and complex trauma are often inundated with intrusive thoughts and nightmares and have trouble connecting their thoughts into cohesive patterns. If her brain is giving her trouble, it may be helpful for her to tell stories, either out loud or written. Making up stories about a favorite place or joyous event produces hope. Replacing harmful thoughts with healthy ones is an ideal way for her to rewire her brain. Another medium like paint or colored pencils or markers may also be helpful to put a story together. Art is very useful in the healing process. When we are focused on calming actions, it's easier to think. Art is a compelling motivator in this way. It will help her focus her attention. Then she can start to decide what to keep thinking about by asking herself, is it helpful to think about this? Changing thought patterns takes time. There is no easy fix. Taking the time to think about what she's good at or what she's grateful for while engaging in her normal routine, like brushing her teeth or getting dressed, is a great start. I used Post-it notes around my house to prompt me to think about positive things. It really did help. If she is pregnant, focusing on caring for herself and her baby is likely to be a tremendous help for healing. Thinking good thoughts is life-giving, as we learn in Philippians 4:8. Finally, my brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are honest, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, and if there is any virtue and anything to praise, Think on these things. Scientific studies show that mindfulness, or a calm focus, literally rewires our brains. In addition, taking a few minutes each day to review goals and mark progress is the top secret to success for high achievers. If your client is suffering debilitating symptoms of PTSD, a goal might be as simple as saying or reading something nice to herself in the mirror each morning. This can be a real win for some people. These simple things might seem small, but they are the premise of publications like Our Daily Bread. A short daily reading to lift the spirit, soul, and mind might just be the baby step she needs. It took time to develop the symptoms of PTSD or complex trauma, and it will take time to learn how to manage them. Healing is possible. As long as we're breathing, there's hope for a better future. We live in a microwave society. We expect everything to be instant. But that's not how we are designed, and it's not how life works. She will need time to learn how to be at peace. Assisting clients over the long term is your specialty. You do it every day in helping clients develop patience through pregnancy and child rearing. This is a great work to be proud of.